what an interesting thing that's happening in the world though right now with this coronavirus. It's getting kind of scary, isn't it?
It's getting massive is what it is. And I'll tell you one thing, we're very lucky that President Trump has done the things that he's done. He shut off those borders so quick. And when you look at a place like France or Germany, Aaron just got back from there, all those countries in Europe, they have a higher count of the coronavirus than the United States has. And so,
wow. I have a question for you before we really start talking. Everybody says that, the summer's coming, the virus will be killed from the heat. But then I point out, I'm like, well, how come it's so rampant down in Iran if the summer heat kills it? Is it kind of going against some of the rules? Is this COVID-19 virus going against some of the rules?
It definitely is. Now, here's the point with it. It's not a genuine virus. They call it an N coronavirus, and they've given it the COVID nomenclature, so they have it exactly. But the N on where it says N corona stands for novel. And if you step one step back from that, it actually means unnatural. That's what it is in science. So it's an unnatural virus. Here's the story of what happened. You can see it on, perhaps you've seen it on Facebook. I published it. A professor from big liberal university, with for the no borders, and they want open borders and all this kind of thing. And he is running the virology department, for Harvard University. He had some assistants. And with that, these assistants were both Chinese, and they're supposed to be students. In reality, they were spies. One was the officer in the Chinese army, and they were his assistants doing it. Now, this thing you could make a movie out of. But then the Chinese were secretly, covertly, for many years, sending him right up to last month, $50,000 a month. He wasn't claiming it or anything. It was coming in covertly. And that was to develop viruses for biological warfare from them. That's what they believe. So here's what happened. This is as much as they do know. The coronavirus, the type that we are facing now, was sent to him from Wuhan Virology Center. And when it came, he took it and he altered the DNA. When he altered the DNA, it made it more virulent, more contagious, and he built resistance into it. Now, that's where we are with DNA now, doing SNPs and gene splicing and all of these things. And he did it. Then he sent it back to Wuhan secretly, and they were testing it there. And they had a paper that they were going to publish on it, and then it broke out, and they didn't want to announce that it broke out because the Chinese, quite frankly, are just liars, and they didn't want to tell anyone, and that it just broke out and came from nowhere. So they held off until this woman who was a PhD there wrote a paper on the N coronavirus with it. And so that had some credibility, and it wouldn't be just looked at as big espionage that was going on with that kind of thing. So anyway, once she published the book, then they announced they had the epidemic going. And of course, their story was that it came from this wild animal market they had. But actually now they've traced it back far enough. It comes back through her. She got contaminated herself at the university working on it. And because it has an incubation period, where most viruses have a 1, 2, or 3 day at the very most incubation period, this has an incubation period which goes, they think initially it goes 14 days. Now they're finding some people that stayed dormant for 30 days before it infects. But the thing that's very unique about this compared to other viruses is that it is much more powerful in a lot of different ways. Number one, the incubation period is a virus isn't contagious. But in this one, if it's 14 or 30 days or wherever it's at, it's contagious every single day, and you don't show a sign of it. So she was out with it. They figure she had it for a couple of weeks while she's going around through Wuhan, and they've been able to trace this back to her. And from her, it went into the wild animal market. It did not come out of the wild animal market from it, but that's where it got contaminated. That's the way the thing got written and done. And so then I don't know all the story. And of course, the FBI is not going to tell me, but they went in and arrested him. And I think Harvard's been getting hundreds of millions of Chinese dollars, and Chinese just aren't generous. They don't just give you that. And it's because they're stealing technology and those things. So when they followed through, this is what I'm surmising. They found out about the money coming through secretly to him, because money has to be wired in ways. And so I guess they found that out. And so they went in and arrested him, and they arrested the 30-year-old, said he was a student who was an officer in the Chinese army. They looked for the other student. He wasn't there. And they found out real quick he was boarding a plane for China. So they stopped the plane, arrested him, and he had 21 vials of biological agents for germ warfare that he was smuggling into China. He had it in a sock in his suitcase. And so they went through everything, found that. So now 3 of them are in jail, and they could be executed over it because it is treason, and or they'll probably get life sentences, I would think, for what they've done. It's a terrible thing. So anyway, that's the story of it. Now,
yeah, that's a horrible way for somebody to make money, is to make stuff that'll kill people.
They don't care. In China, in fact, is if they have people that commit certain kinds of crimes, some of them would call white collar crimes. They will take them, and people here, we don't know because we don't pay that much attention. Of course, I've been to China 20 or 30 times, and I bought from there for over 30 years, so I know China real well. But you can find it out yourself anyway on the internet. So much is out there, and they take people who are convicted of a lot of different variety of crimes, and they'll take them to a stadium, like a football stadium or something, and they'll line them up, turn the TV on it, shoot them all. Sometimes they'll shoot 200-300 of them right there, and all the people are watching on TV because they want to make an example out of them with what they did. So they're a very vicious people, and they don't have any respect for life at all with what they want. And so there's a big opposition to the Communist Party there, but the Communist Party is so crushing to them that they can't handle it. But here's what the Chinese did. They took it to where they made it so that it is dormant for all this period of time. I think a professor from Harvard did, of course, because he had the technology. They smuggled it out to him. He altered the DNA, sent it back. So now it lies dormant for 14 to 30 days and is contaminating, infecting people all the time with it. And then that person maybe breaks out with it. If not, they're going to be like that story you heard of with Typhoid Mary that killed so many people because she was the carrier but never had the typhoid. And that was, I think, about World War I or before time with her, but she was famous. And so anyway, it contaminates for all that period of time. Now they say, well, when the cold weather's over, then viruses die. That's true of viruses. And viruses normally only live for 2 or 3 days. However, this one is raging through not just Iran, it's into other Arabian countries there. And the temperature is 110 degrees there now. And as a result, it's just going right through. It has no effect on it at all.
Wow.
So then the other thing is when a virus lands on an inanimate object, it's dead within seconds. It dies quickly, but not this one. It'll say, they just found some where it stayed 9 days on it. And now they've got some that are going up just about to 30 days too. And it can be on a countertop or a handle on a sink, or in a bathroom or a toilet seat, if you will, or anything. And it's all been designed to do just that, so it can be very virulent with it. So it lives for a few weeks or so outside. And then the other thing that's so bad about it, other viruses are all by touch. You know, you touch something and eventually you get up to your mouth or your face, and you get it through your mouth, your nose, your eyes, somehow rub something, and that's how it gets in your system. This virus is airborne. You can get it from contact, but breathing in with this virus takes it right in. And so the thing about the virus, and that's why I've been advising people not to wear masks, is it doesn't do any good. The virus is so small, it goes through the mask with the oxygen that you're breathing and lodges in your lung. So then if you got a mask on, then now you have viral pneumonia that's going on in there, and all of the air you're breathing out now catches on the mask with mucus and things like that, and you become more unhealthy with it. You have your own little incubator there going with all of those deposits that are on it. So you can get it from just people breathing in the air. So it's a vicious one. And the kill rate when they first started on it, before you went to Australia, Doc, was they said it's quite potent. And they looked at that coronavirus to start with, because that woman's paper had been published from China. And they have a, say on a, for a fatality point, they had a normal seasonal flu virus kills 2 to 3 people out of 100. Okay. And, or it has an infection rate of about, and death rate with it. But this coronavirus is greater than smallpox, which has a factor of 12. This happens to be 14. And it's more so than even Ebola with it. And the highest rated one they had was the Spanish flu, which went through World War I. And that was deadly, killed at least 50 million to maybe 100 million people around the world, decimated the Western armies. In fact, in the fight against Germany, the United States lost 100,000 soldiers to Germans, and they lost 500,000 to 600,000 to the Spanish flu. Those are soldiers with it. So it has a virility factor of 18. So if you take smallpox at 12 and you put Corolla at 14, and the worst that's ever happened is 18, it shows you how powerful it is. But they just 2 days ago evaluated and changed that classification. And where they had it at 14, it is now 32. So man, that is a virulent strain that they have designed, artificially designed her. So it's an unnatural virus. There's living components and altered components that are living in it too, but it's death by design from good old Harvard University. And the big greed they have, and the greed and the mental attitude of the Chinese towards it. So that's a lot to be sold. It's a big story. I could tell a lot more about it. I've been very heavily involved with it. I still have a lot of connections in China with it. And so I've been on top of it. Now, the problem with the flu is this one, they don't have a vaccine. And I just published it today on my Facebook, and a report came out, I think yesterday or so. And it has one of the, from the CDC, Health Center for Chronic or for Diseases that are chronic. And what they're doing is they've taken and been testing different viruses on it. Now, virus, as you know, creates an antibody that attaches to the virus, and then it identifies it to the immune system. So they have some, and every year they have a different flu virus, but those few viruses are estimated, and about all of them start out of China. And so they go there, and there's people researching it right now for what the seasonal flu virus is going to be in 2 or 3 years, because it takes them that long to get out of medication. So the doctor who was from the CDC, which is big United States Center for Disease Control, right here, he's on speaking, and he said, "Oh, we're on the fast track." And I know Trump told him to be on the fast track, and he's saying that. He says, "Yeah, we're on the fast track, but you need to understand when you get in the medical world, we have to test these. But this is going to be through a staging point in just 6 weeks, and we've never ever done it this fast." Then he goes on and talks about the types of testing they have to do in 3 phases, and he said it will be out in about 1.5 to 2 years if it's successful. With this rate of contagiousness, can you imagine waiting for a vaccine for 1.5 or 2 to be out there? But what they said, Center for Disease Control and the Chinese, there is no vaccine for it. There's no medication that will kill it. The only thing standing between you and the virus is your immune system. That's it. But that's not it. Because many years ago, I discovered that organic fulvic acid would attach to viruses. There's studies there. I published some of them. You can pull them off. I've gone to putting them on MeWe because Facebook is, I think, 3 times now because I've been putting stuff out, and they don't want me doing things that are against their philosophy, like free speech. And so I'm publishing now most of them on MeWe, and got my own site and got quite a few people that are on that following it. Some I publish in Facebook too that I think will get through. But in reality, I found studies many years ago. In fact, it's about 20 years ago. They actually knew at that time that fulvic acid would attach to a virus. Now, the reason the way it does that is fulvic acid is the way that a plant secretes fulvic acid into the soil through microbes. And I won't go through the interaction, but then it goes to large particles, of fulvic acid does, and it chelates it. I tell people it's how do you eat an elephant, a bite at a time. And that's the same way that fulvic acid does. It goes to large pieces of calcium or magnesium or any types of nutrients, and they're too large to get through the root. So it just takes small ionic pieces off. And then because it's so water soluble, it's absorbed right up, and it starts the chemical reaction that it goes through. And this is how you get the hydrogen in your body that keeps it running, is from the food that you are eating, because it just changes from one chemical form to another in the biological processes. So hydrogen is the key that makes the organic fulvic acid along with some other components that are there. And then it gets transferred to cell to cell, system to system around. And then it gets to where it gets up in the mitochondria, and it releases that hydrogen with the NAD, where it gets, the NAD has a plus sign that stands for hydrogen that's on it. So that comes from the food that we eat. Now, as we get older, hydrogen levels go down in our body, where our digestive system isn't good, or eating habits perhaps aren't. But that's why in the pack that we have for this product, we have, and we have it for the Sentinel eggs. We have the H2 sticks, because they are so potent to just flood within minutes. It floods every cell in your body, the 440 trillion of them, with hydrogen. And so it's getting it into the cell so it can function a little bit better. I'm getting a little off with that, talking about fulvic acid, but fulvic acid, the engine, the power plant in it is hydrogen, and it has an immense amount of power. So as fulvic acid is formed, it's designed, it's a chelator. It takes the nutrients in, and because it's organic, it's like the key that goes in a lock and opens the cell. It'll hit the receptor, cell will take it in, and then, but it's bound so strongly to whatever nutrient or mineral it's carrying, even the acids in the digestive system cannot break it down. So it gets all the way in the cell, but when it gets in the cell, they have enzymes and they just uncouple it. once they've uncoupled it, it now is still a chelator, and it will pick up toxic heavy metals and things like that, contaminants in your body, and take them out. It also gets utilized for the hydrogen that's in it that the body will take. So taking organic fulvic acid is really great. And that's why we have it in Spectrum Max, because it's so powerful in breaking down those components into where they're very usable and gets into all the cells. You take inorganic minerals, for instance, they are about 3 to 4% absorbable, and you use fulvic acid, they go up to like 97%, somewhere in the 91 to 97% range of absorbability. So you see the power with it. Now, what is that power? It's really electromagnetic power or charges. And just like with two magnets, if you had a couple of magnets and they were the same, and you had a positive end and you had a negative end, right? If you try to put the same together, two negative, they repel. You put two positives, they repel. But you flip it around and they bond very tightly, and then it's hard to get them apart from it. That's how fulvic acid works, the same way. So what it does is you have, here's the equation so people can understand. You have a host cell, that's a cell in your body, or an animal, works the same way. So your pets are not safe from this one. And there's a number of them that now have contracted it also, especially since it's airborne. But and can you imagine, well, through some of the scenarios, but anyway, so with that, you can take, and fulvic acid has a very powerful positive electromagnetic charge. Viruses are spiny. They have a lot of fingers coming out every which way. And it's so that no matter which, there's centers there, but all these fingers come out. So no matter how it turns, one of the arms with a sucker on the end of it will contact a cell. So once one contacts a cell, it locks onto the cell. Why? Because you have a negative electromagnetic charge, and the cell membrane is positive. So opposites attract. So it attaches to the cell, and then once it's attached, the virus drills a hole down through the membrane and starts injecting its RNA and DNA down into the host cell. And they grow till there's thousands of it, then they explode and are dispersed throughout the whole system. And it just keeps happening and happening and happening. So that's why flu spreads so fast, is because that kind of thing. Well, flus only have normally a 2 or 3 day life period, and this one, they don't know how long it is now. They know gestation period, at least 14, and could be as many as 30 days. And so you can build up an awfully lot of these viruses within your system, being contaminating people everywhere. But let's flip back to this relationship again. Here you have the virus that has punched into the host cell, and now it's putting all of its materials down there. And because of that magnetic attraction of negative to positive, it's held there. But along comes fulvic acid. And if the virus has not attached, it has a positive charge, also like the cell membrane, but the power of it is immense in comparison. So it will be drawn to, because the magnetics, you can pull, take a magnet and you pick up iron shavings, it's going like this, come to it. And so it's drawn to the virus and it bonds to that receptor with the suckers on it. And now they can't be broken. And so it effectively does them all. And it's like you put something that was very dangerous in an envelope, sealed it up. Then what is it? It's sealed. So because all those receptors are sealed, then the virus can't replicate. And within 2 to 3 days, it will die on its own, or the immune system will find it, because signals go out because of that happening, and the immune system will hunt it down and kill it. But either way, no harm, no foul is kind of the way of looking at it. You think how revolutionary that is to be able to do that. But I'm not done there. The other thing, I'm not done, I'm just telling you what's there. But anyway, then they have done studies. This is so studied for nothing being out there or done other than really what we've done and a few other minor players. But we've done big things in it. I was selling $500 million a year of it with my previous company, and we were using it for just chelating minerals and nutrients into the body. But I knew all along, because I read the studies and I saw what it would do with viruses. The first study that was so impressed on me is it wouldn't let the HIV, which is a very dangerous virus, it wouldn't let it replicate and wouldn't let it convert over to AIDS. And so I'm just saying, and I published them, some that are there, and they're talking about that if you have an HIV infection and you have fulvic acid in your system, it can't progress on and become AIDS. AIDS from the HIV. So that tells you a lot about it. But now it comes up to where this sucker in the virus is attached to the cell. And so here comes the fulvic acid. Well, its electromagnetic power is much greater than the cell's membrane. So as a result, it will be like prying it off. It'll pull it off and it will attach to it. And now it can't pump any more RNA or DNA down into the cell. It'll pull it right off it, plus bind to all of the others. Now that's pretty amazing. That doesn't mean the cell isn't infected, because it is. And it will go on and they'll replicate in the cell and they explode when the cell gets too contaminated with it. It just dies. And then they're all out in your circulatory system. But if you're taking the fulvic acid in our body shield that we have, it will just as it's there, it's just magnetism. They just come together. It seeks it out. It neutralizes. It makes it so it's impotent. It can't replicate. And that's a powerful thought to think. And so if you think of a vaccine, what is a vaccine? Well, you're going after it once it's in the body, and you're attaching something and hoping the immune system finds it. And depending on how good your guesstimate is of the people that make the vaccine, some was like 2 years ago, it was only 10% effective. I think that for the seasonal flus. This year for the seasonal flu, it's about 30 to 40%. So they've done a little better. But that's not a great success rate, because they're guesstimating what it's going to be and designing a virus or a vaccine based upon that. Well, here comes one, and this one has never had anything like this before, because it's unnatural, because it's genetically manipulated and altered with this. So this is part man-made and a natural one that has been made unnatural. And so then you've got that. Well, the power of fulvic acid, if you want to look at it this way, the magnetic power of fulvic acid versus the magnetic power that's on a sucker virus is massively different. It will take those so fast and tie them up. And it was used, just a little background. I first found out about it in the 1980s, because when they had the Chernobyl radiation and the nuclear meltdown in Chernobyl, Russians had done a lot of work with this. And they took and sprayed the ground, the soil, the trees, the buildings, any surfaces. People bathed in it. They drank it. They gave it to animals and everything else to save them. Why? Because that fulvic acid has got a number of properties. And now it's probably going to be time. I've got so much going right now, I don't want to launch off into it, but it's time to show the miracle. This is nature's miracle molecule of all of them on planet Earth. Now we have the greatest discovery in the history of human health with the age pill. Now it's become number 2, because we have senolytics, which is the greatest discovery in the history of human health. Got number 1, number 2, but the miracle molecule of them all is organic fulvic acid. And it has such a tremendous surplus of electrons. And when radiation comes along, it's starving, it's hungry for it, and it has a tremendous power, and it will take the electrons away from your tissues. That's why they destroy so quickly. But what happens when it comes up with fulvic acid exchanges electrons with it because it's from the sun, you know, has that power, and exchanges electrons, and it satisfy those those rings of valences. So it's no longer destructive. So it can annihilate radiation. We're not even talking about it for that, but that's why I really have it in this company, because when they had the big meltdown with the tsunami in Japan, they had radiation going all over Japan. And so I quickly made the formulation and put it out. And we still have a fair amount of people using it down there because there's still hot spots around. And we sold it down in Japan and had it there. And I've been telling some people, just telling them that if you get the flu, here's the real answer to it. Because if you think of a vaccine attaching an antibody, that's good. Then the immune system finds it and kills it. But before that ever could happen, this will grab it, because that powerful electronic bonding so strong that it can't possibly pull away, so strong that the virus will be pulled away from any cell it's attaching to, and any cells that come out will be immediately just filled in with this. So this is really a great discovery and has an enormous amount of power to do it. So that's what we've been talking about here for it. Then the second thing is there's a couple of things to understand. If you get infected, and we have some people here working in office, I think we have 3 of them that are off now with the seasonal flu. But the problem is the flus that are coming around now, there's a new one that'll be out. Well, it's out now and multiplying. And there's the second one. It's remember the deadly one, the SARS, and then there was the H1N1, the swine flu. Then you heard the bird flu. Well, they have an H1N1 coming again, and an H5N1, which is coming now also. Both of them are, and they're very virulent. They're more virulent than the SARS virus was. So I'll tell you, these things are retroviruses, and they mutate, and they change from one form. So whatever vaccine you got won't work next year, you know, on a retrovirus, because it changes. That's the nature of viruses, how they do that. But also a thing to remember is viruses are all over plants and things like that. And so the plants develop a system to fight viral infections. That system is based upon, we believe, organic fulvic acid is found in Body Shield. After all, it's in the cell, and after all, it's going through the entire plant, and it can bind to any viruses that come in. So that it's very good. And if you actually have, you can get a virus on a potato leaf. That's very common to have, even in a tomato. And you can spray it with organic fulvic acid, goes away because of the properties that it has to do that. So here we have that. And then we have accelerator. An accelerator is nothing but things to fortify the immune system. So if you've got the flu, you have a power-packed list of ingredients that are there fortifying different components of the immune system, and there are a few to it. So it is strong and ready to attack and to kill the viruses or a bacteria or whatever else it is too. But influence is mostly for viruses. Then you come in and you get fucoidin. That's very strong on viruses, but extremely strong on bacteria. And then you come along to Avenger. That's extremely strong on bacterium and somewhat strong on a variety of viruses to do it. So you've got those 4 mainline products, but what's the best of them? It's Body Shield for sure. What's next? It's Influence. Those are the 2 most important. Then you can take those others. But we haven't finished off there, because the one thing like this doctor from the CDC that I just posted on the video is saying that, well, the way he started talking about, and it shows you, I mean, there they are at that level, and they still don't really understand what they're dealing with. And he was talking about, well, viruses are contaminated by you touching things. And so washing your hands is really important. He went through wash your hands for 20 minutes. How long are you going to stand there and wash your hands for 20 minutes with this kind of thing? And says, then if you touch the faucet, you're contaminated again, you know, if there's virus on it, because this virus, they do know that it's residual and there. So they're saying hand washing is the first line of defense. Perhaps it is, but I will tell you, the big wall, the border wall, is really fulvic acid. So it's got the power to neutralize that. Then we have two other things. If you're going to wash your hands, we have a cucumber lime hand cleanser, and in it, it has ionic silver. Ionic silver is very effective against viruses and, in fact, bacterium too, with it, much more so than the alcohol that they recommend for them, because alcohol won't get it all, but this will get it all with it. And we get into the ionic size of silver because we put organic fulvic acid in cucumber lime. Now, this was all done before this crisis comes, so it shows you we do believe in what we're talking. Body Shield was here years ago because of that. We just said, okay, here's another big application for it. So now cucumber lime has ionic silver in it. It cleans the hands very nicely. And you can't say it sanitizes and we're going to go through a big drug approval process, but we just tell them it makes skin and surfaces pristine and clean. That's what it'll do. So you go through with all that, you got, okay, that's your first line of defense. Then the other thing is we put Terminator in a 2-ounce spray bottle, and you can buy that. And the reason we have it that size is it's handy. A man can put it in his pocket, a woman can drop it in her purse, and she's always got it with her, or he does. And you go in the bathroom, you can spray down handles or anything else like that. You can spray down the surfaces. You can wash your hands. If you're washing them in a public restroom, they're not going to have any microbial soaps. And if they do, most of those are for bacteria, and they become, they're really mutated to where they're not affected. Like triclosan now does virtually nothing, where they thought it was the wonder one for hand soap before because it's just that. But here you come along with Terminator, and you can wash your hands in there as much as you want, but then just spray your hands with it. This is Terminator is so palatable that it's approved for potable water. In other words, you can take virus-laden water, put it in it, and it will become virus-free. It will bind all the viruses in the water. And one of the things they do in some of them where they have that contamination is they put it in, because now the virus can't replicate and it dies with it, and the water is absolutely drinkable. So it's nothing harmful to the body or anything else like that. So consider this: if you went into a restroom, if you went to use the toilet, would you want to spray the toilet seat? Would you like to spray the handles or anything that was there on the door or on the faucets? And how about you get all that done and your hands are washed, then spray your hands with the Terminator, but you still got to open the door to get out of there. So you may want to spray that, just take a little towel and wipe it when you go out. So we have it covered, I think, about as far as it can be. Now, everything we had inventory 3 or 4 months supply, but it was for selling it, for some people using it for viral infection, and the different things were being sold, but we had them all made. So instead of spending 4, 5, 6 months in researching, figuring out how to do, we had the formulas already. We know what it could do, and all we had to do is just put it for sale. Well, we put it for sale and thought, well, it'll give us a month or maybe a little over if we get lucky, and till we can get more materials in, because we could see what's happening here is going to be gigantic compared to the uses that it's been used. But when you really think about this, where it can neutralize, annihilate radiation, lots of people have radon in their homes, and so it's going to be a great product for that too, see, with it. So because it'll neutralize it. And so as a consequence, we've got that product, and it was available, but we ran out in, I think, 3 or 4 days. We're gone to the walls with this thing. We shipped out everything we could. We've now got it approved in Europe, Central approved down in New Zealand, Australia, and we've got it in Japan, and of course, the United States here. So we brought in large amounts of it. We're even fortifying a few more things that you'll see some changes come on the label to make it even more powerful or effective. And there's nothing like, if you're dealing with a virus like this, of having a bunch of overkill. And that's what I'm going to be doing to make sure we can get everything we can out of it.